The sun hadn't fully risen, but the base was already buzzing with tension. Everyone was moving fast, checking gear, double-checking weapons, and sharing quick nods that carried more meaning than words. She stood slightly apart, her medic bag slung over one shoulder, a quiet calm around her that drew curious glances. Some of the newer soldiers smirked when she passed. "Just a medic," they whispered. They didn't know her, and she didn't mind. Her job wasn't to impress, it was to save lives. The orders came through the radio with a sharp crackle. An enemy fire had trapped one of the squads in a half-collapsed building on the outskirts. Smoke already curled into the sky, and she could hear the distant echoes of gunfire. Without hesitation, she checked her medical supplies, tightened the straps of her vest, and fell into formation. The teasing smirks from earlier didn't matter anymore, this was real. The path to the building was littered with debris, chunks of concrete, twisted metal, and the occasional smoldering car that had been abandoned in a rush. Every step required careful calculation, every shadow could conceal danger. She could hear the heartbeat of her own fear, steady but controlled, mingling with the distant sounds of soldiers shouting orders and the occasional sharp crack of gunfire. When she reached the perimeter of the building, the scene struck her with brutal clarity. Two of her squadmates were pinned down, one of them limping heavily, smoke stinging their eyes. A wall had collapsed just a few feet away, creating a makeshift trap that cut off the only clear exit. She moved without waiting for permission, her training kicking in automatically. Kneeling beside the injured, she assessed quickly. One soldier had a deep gash across his thigh, bleeding fast, the other's arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. Bullets whizzed past as she tore strips from her uniform to apply pressure, her hands steady despite the chaos. A younger soldier shouted at her to get down, and she ducked just long enough to pop up again, continuing her work as if the world around her had slowed down. A sudden explosion shook the building, dust and debris raining down. She coughed, grit in her teeth, but didn't stop. She shouted instructions to the others, coordinating their retreat while keeping eyes on the injured. Someone called out, mocking, "You're gonna get yourself killed, medic." She didn't answer. Words were useless here, action spoke louder. She lifted one soldier over her shoulder, the other she supported by his good arm, weaving through the wreckage with a determination that left even the skeptical ones momentarily speechless. By the time they reached relative safety, smoke choking the air and adrenaline pumping through veins, a few of the squad finally looked at her differently. The same woman they'd laughed at now carried the weight of their survival on her shoulders. They didn't say it aloud, but the respect was tangible. She dropped to her knees to check the injured, her face streaked with dust and sweat, the "just a medic" label already fading in the harsh light of reality. The radio buzzed with urgent chatter as smoke thickened around them, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. She gritted her teeth and tightened the straps on her medic pack. The squad needed her, and hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. Bullets cracked overhead, ricocheting off walls and metal, but she refused to let fear slow her down. Every second counted, and the injured couldn't wait for someone else to act. "Move," she shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. Some of the soldiers hesitated, glancing at her like she was reckless, but her determination left no room for doubt. She had memorized every step of her training, every emergency procedure drilled into her until it became instinct. There was no thought, only action. She sprinted through the smoke toward a collapsed stairwell, where two more squad members were pinned beneath beams and rubble. Her heart hammered, but she focused on breathing, on scanning for danger while simultaneously assessing injuries. The first soldier she reached had debris pressing against his chest. She threw herself into the rubble, using leverage and careful calculation to shift heavy beams just enough to free him. He gasped, coughing, and she quickly strapped him to a makeshift stretcher, improvising with what little was available. Another explosion shook the building, sending dust into her eyes and deafening her for a heartbeat. Still, she didn't stop. She crawled toward the second soldier, who moaned in pain, blood dripping from a gash across his forehead. Her hands worked quickly, cleaning the wound and applying pressure, talking to him softly to keep him conscious. "Stay with me," she said, voice steady, though adrenaline rattled through her. "I've got you. We're getting out." She coordinated with the remaining squad members, directing them to cover angles, check corners, and keep watch while she handled the wounded. The mocking laughter of "just a medic" had long since vanished. They were too busy relying on her competence and courage. The building groaned ominously above them, warning of imminent collapse. She realized the only way out required carrying both soldiers down a narrow, crumbling stairwell while under fire. With the first on her back and supporting the second with her free arm, she moved with a careful, deliberate pace, testing each step. Bullets slammed into walls inches from her head, but she didn't flinch. Her entire focus was on the lives she carried. Every footstep was a calculation, every movement a promise that no one would be left behind. When they finally emerged into the open air, smoke choking their lungs and dust coating every inch of skin, the squad paused, staring at her with awe. The soldiers who had doubted her before were now silent, recognizing the unwavering bravery it took to carry them through hell. She lowered the injured to the ground, exhausted but unbroken, and finally allowed herself a brief glance at the chaos she had navigated. This wasn't just survival, it was a testament to the truth that courage doesn't come from rank or weaponry, but from the heart willing to face the flames for others. The smoke had cleared slightly, but the battlefield still burned with scattered fires and groaning debris. She could hear distant cries and the sharp rattle of gunfire that hadn't stopped for a moment. Her squad was battered, shaken, and in desperate need of extraction. But one soldier was still unaccounted for, caught on the far side of a collapsed building, his radio silent. Every instinct screamed danger, but leaving him behind was not an option. She sprinted toward the smoke, her medic pack heavier than ever, filled with supplies she might not even have time to use. Bullets tore through the air around her, and debris tumbled down with every step, but she moved with a singular purpose. Her mind shut out the fear, focusing only on the rhythm of her steps, the sounds of breathing, the faint moans that guided her through the haze. Soldiers she passed shouted warnings, but she waved them off. "Cover me," she yelled. It was no longer about being just a medic. It was about being the lifeline that nobody else could provide. Reaching the trapped soldier, she found him pinned under a heavy beam, blood soaking through his uniform, his breathing shallow. She didn't pause for hesitation. Strapping herself into position, she leveraged every ounce of strength, calling on the core. Training that had saved lives before. The beam wouldn't budge at first, and dust filled her lungs, stinging her eyes, but with a grunt and a sharp push, it shifted just enough. She guided him into her arms, wrapping him securely against her chest, and started the perilous trek back. The world seemed to slow. Every step was a calculated risk, every shadow could hide death. Her heart pounded, sweat streaming down her face, but she kept moving. A wall cracked above her, threatening to collapse, but she adjusted mid-step, protecting the injured soldier as if he were her own. When gunfire came too close, she ducked low, rolling with the motion to shield him while still pressing forward. The others covered her, shouting encouragement, but it was her determination that drove every inch. When she finally reached the perimeter, gasping for breath and coated in dust and blood, the squad erupted in quiet awe. Those who had mocked her, dismissed her, even doubted her, now stood silently, knowing they had witnessed something extraordinary. The soldier in her arms was alive, and it was because she refused to give up, refused to let fear dictate her actions. She knelt, quickly checking his wounds, applying the final bandages, and giving him a reassuring smile. As the medevac arrived, the squad gathered around her, a mix of exhaustion and reverence in their eyes. One whispered, "She carried us all," another simply shook his head, unable to find words. She straightened, still catching her breath, and allowed herself the faintest of smiles. Courage wasn't about rank, weapons, or recognition, it was about action when it mattered most. And today, she had carried them all. If you want more stories of bravery, resilience, and unsung heroes, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Her Stories Words, where every tale reminds us that ordinary people can perform extraordinary acts. Don't miss the next story. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we celebrate courage in its purest form.